Hello, this is Jenny from the A to Z of Emotional Health online library. I'm here with Steve Judd. Steve, all week I have been having conversations with guys about whether or not they have grown up in a world where it was okay to show their feelings, to talk about their emotions, whether they feel that's okay now. I mean, as adults, I think it's probably the one area, and I'm making a bit of a sweeping statement, but it's probably one area where I think men in many ways are more disadvantaged in terms of equality with women. You know, there's a lot of cultural stuff that stops men from accessing their feelings and talking about their emotions, even if they're really in trouble. So can I ask your experiences and your thoughts about this?
My thoughts about this are easy. It seems to me that over the millennia, until very recently, until just the last 30 years or so, men have always been seen as the breadwinner and the protector. Therefore, they've fallen into the trap of a patriarchal arrangement and become the sort of the alpha male, the dominant role model. So there's not been the capacity or the willingness to demonstrate emotion and affection because it's not a manly thing.
Yeah.
In the last 30 or 40 years, especially with the advent of the internet and the emergence of powerful women in the world, perhaps this is finally and hopefully rapidly changing. And a lot more men are not only beginning to feel for themselves for the first time, but express those feelings. In my terms of experience, I am a little bit biased because I'm a classic Cancerian male, and I am quite sensitive and moody, and I only have to see something traumatic or lovey-dovey on television, and that's it. I can feel the empathy and I'm bawling. But at the same time, perhaps it's because of the work I do. I do say to a lot of people, well, how do you feel about this? And when I'm dealing with men, I often get the reaction that they have to stop and think about their feelings as opposed to just expressing their feelings. Yeah. Women, much more natural to just express their feelings. Men have to think about it first. But that is changing. Gradually.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's been really interesting, the conversations I've had. So pretty much across the board, every guy has said maybe that they receive really conflicting messages. So in a way they know that it's actually okay to talk about their feelings, and it's almost like logically they know that that's okay and they know that it's helpful to do so, but they still receive like really contradictory messages. Like they'll still, maybe from their peers or even in the press, there's elements of kind of, you know, you're a wuss, or you're I've spoken to a couple of guys who were sort of former professional footballers, very macho kind of environment, and they said, you know, however emotional we are, it's as though, you know, if you almost daren't demonstrate that because you're, you know, for fear of being targeted. It's really, really interesting.
Well, in this day and age, we're living in such a kind of accelerated time of evolution, not just in terms of population and technology and even spirituality, but in terms of we're expanding our own individual consciousness, and that is having an effect on our ability to own our feelings and to live life according to our own beliefs, philosophies and feelings as well. And that's cross-gender, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose what that raises for me is this sort of paradox, I suppose, or maybe I agree with you about the evolution of humanity. I think we are in an extraordinarily evolutionary phase, which is really, really fast. Everything is changing really quickly, and we're having to, I think, redefine ourselves. And that gives us the most extraordinary potential and opportunity. What I think is interesting is, I suppose, how we embrace it, whether we do that in a very, I don't know, me kind of way. I think I see a degree of what I would call still quite emotionally reactive behavior that tends to be, I mean, maybe a response to kind of underlying issues that haven't really been met, but much more, I'm in tune with my feelings and I deserve sometimes overriding the feelings and awareness of others. And then, you know, so I think it's really curious. Like, to me, there's a balance to be found in terms of people having that ownership, but also understanding that there's an impact. And I guess empathy needs to run alongside it. It's kind of empathy with ourselves, but also empathy with others as well.
I might suggest that with the majority of men who are comfortable with their feelings and emotions and able to talk about them, the single biggest factor here is probably age and maturity. As men get older and they learn the difference between being projective and assertive on the one hand, as opposed to confrontational and aggressive on the other. They become more comfortable with their maturity and knowledgeable about themselves. But when you're young, by young I mean under 35, and you're in a sort of pressured situation with family and young kids and peer group pressure, and as you say, the indoctrination of the media and the religions who are all expecting you to fit old archetypes, then yes, I do understand why younger men still have a lot of problems around what it means to be a man in the 21st century. And I do feel there's a lot of undermining of the old archetypes going on, which is leading to a lot of confusion amongst younger males. And as a result, the kickback of that, of course, we're seeing in gun crime, gang culture, and things like this with the younger people. Yeah.
I think you're right. When we don't have a clarity of role model, I mean, I guess emotions carry so much energy. And if we don't have a clarity or of boundaries of structure, I know I listened to a video that you did where you talked about resistance as being something that's helpful. And I remember listening to that and thinking, you know, about the fact that we need structure, we need something in order to channel. Otherwise, if you, it's almost like having a pot of energy with nothing around it. It's all over the place. And I think emotions are a bit like that. So if you're full of kind of, I don't know, hormonally fueled emotion, and you've got no channel, no direction, and role models create a channel, I think, you know, definitive roles give us something. Even if we push against something, we've still got something to give us some clarity. When there's nothing, I think that emotional energy spills over, and I agree, there's no container for it.
One of the things I've always had a problem about defining for myself the difference between feelings and emotions. And I've worked it out for myself as far as I'm concerned, that feelings are innate. They are mine. They are internal and they come from within me. But emotions require interaction with the outside world and or other people to make them happen. So when someone turns around to someone else and says, "You made me feel," then that's just so wrong in so many different ways. Whereas if they turn around and say, "Because of my interaction with you, I feel like this," that's a different story.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think that's one of the most valuable like communication tools that actually I use with people. So if I've got somebody that's really, really reactive, or when I work with couples and they arrive doing battle, which sometimes happens, you know, one of the first things to do is just to call a halt and say, look, actually, we're going to make a rule here, which is you have to own what you're feeling. You can't say you made me, or you know, because the moment you point the finger, I mean, if I was to say, Steve, you're immediately, it's that sort of one force is always met with an equal force. You're just going to create more and more antagonism. But actually, if you sit back and you say, you know, actually, I find myself feeling whatever I'm feeling, and I'm wondering if I can talk to you about it. And you've immediately opened an avenue of communication where hopefully, and within couples, I might even go as far as introducing the idea of, look, I find myself feeling something and I'm wondering if you can help me with it, which is such a different approach to, you've really pissed me off and you've made me feel this way, you know, which is just like it's like setting up a battlefild. And you know, it's such these kind of tools, they're really, really simple, but I'm actually completely agree with you. Also, bang on, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about emotions. Emotions are, they're online all the time, and they're constantly responsive to our environment. And so, you know, I think I sometimes liken emotions to being a bit like the Ferrari of all cars. They can go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a second if the incoming data is sufficient. But actually, none of us have ever had a driving lesson. So suddenly you find yourself at the wheel of a Ferrari and it's out of control and you do not know what to do, which is why I could get on my soapbox about emotional education, because I just think if we could just teach people to understand their emotions, to know how to channel that energy appropriately, to have the skills to be able to communicate effectively from an emotional perspective, we would resolve a vast amount of humanity's problems, I suspect.
I absolutely agree. Emotional intelligence is in short supply on the planet at the moment.
At the moment, isn't it just? And if only we could actually change that. But I guess the fact that we can identify it opens an avenue of opportunity too.
Yes, yes, and perhaps at the moment it seems that the youth of today are not that interested in listening to the older people's, because they see old people as stuck in the past. So perhaps there is a case for reacting in a positive way to that and saying to people of a certain age, i.e. 45, 50 onwards, but they've got to stay with the times instead of living with the past.
Yeah.
And be able to, in order to be able to relate to the emerging youth cultures and to be able to work with them instead of reacting against them.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And again, it's all down to relationship and to relating. And I agree with you. Otherwise, it kind of almost repeats. I mean, you know, if I think I'm 56, so you know, and it would be so easy, wouldn't it, to fall into that trap of moaning about the next the next up and coming generation, rather than recognizing what they're actually trying to deal with, which is a world that is changing faster than I think any of us have ever known or experienced. You know, and actually, you know, approaching their position from a place of appreciation is so different to approaching them from a position of antagonism and criticism, because all you get is, back to that pointing the finger, is you generate a further kind of emotional reactivity in a negative way, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just realized that what we're talking about is actually, as we're talking about it, I'm feeling it going in and thinking, actually, yeah, I can actively work with this. And this is a wonderful time to be alive.
Isn't it just? It's an extraordinary time. I agree with you. And I think for all the challenges that we're seeing out in the world, every single one is presenting us with an opportunity. You know, when you see something that is, you know, maybe significantly over the top, it's quite extraordinary, I think, how many people might not otherwise step up and kind of find a voice, but they feel they need to, or they have to, or they, you know, and again, we have the means to do so now in a way that we haven't before. It's an extraordinary time to be around, isn't it?
It really is. And in every challenge, there's an opportunity
to
see the world in a different way.
Absolutely. Change our perspective on the way we perceive problems, if we could perceive them as opportunities, mistakes as the cutting edge of our evolution instead of a complete crisis and an opportunity to do the naming, blaming, shaming, back to pointing the finger again, which just creates a reaction in return. Shift a few things and it opens so much possibility.
And that is the way to change the world. I
agree wholeheartedly. Steve, it's been an awesome conversation. Thank you ever so much.
No worries. My pleasure.
Thank you. It was brilliant.